If you've never heard true silence, you've never stood in a Florida backwater at dawn. Not beach silence, not suburb silence, swamp silence, the kind that isn't empty, just watchful. The air is thick enough to feel like cloth in your mouth. The water is black, still, and somehow listening. Spanish moss hangs in curtains from the cypress limbs, and everything, your boots, your breath, your thoughts, seems louder than it should be. On the morning they realized the hunters weren't coming back, the first thing anyone noticed wasn't a body. It was a sound, a distant, uneven shotgun blast that didn't belong to any pattern. One, pause, two quick cracks, then nothing. No holler, no laughter, no engines turning over, no men shouting across the reeds, just the swamp settling back into itself like it had swallowed a secret. And the question that would hang over that year like humid air: how do 14 experienced hunters vanish in a place where even a whisper leaves tracks? A brief content warning before we continue. This story involves disappearance, implied violence, and the emotional aftermath of a mass missing persons event. Details will be handled with restraint. This is the Florida Backwater Killings of 1978, 14 hunters who never made it back across the swamp. No bodies were found in those first days, but the town still called it the Killings, because 14 men don't vanish like this unless someone makes sure they don't come back. And it begins with a ritual, simple, familiar, almost comforting. Men packing trucks before sunrise, coffee in dented thermoses, dogs whining at the scent of movement, a cooler full of ice and cheap beer. And the shared, stubborn belief that the swamp is dangerous, but not unbeatable. That belief would not survive the week. The place that swallows maps. The backwaters don't sit politely inside county lines. They sprawl. They lace through palmetto flats and pine scrub and low, flooded hammocks where the ground is more rumor than soil. Old logging roads turn into soft sand, then into nothing at all. Creeks braid into sloughs. Sloughs widen into ponds that look like solid ground until you step and your boot disappears to the ankle. Locals call it the Black, not for any single river, but for the way the water drinks light. In the late 70s, plenty of this country still felt unclaimed by modern life. You could drive 20 minutes from a paved road and end up in a world where the only signs were carved into trees and the only schedules belonged to weather. That's why hunters loved it. Because out there, you weren't just killing time, you were proving something, about skill, about toughness, about knowing how to read a place that didn't care if you lived, and that's why, when 14 men didn't come back, the first reaction in town wasn't panic, it was irritation. "They're late," someone said. "They got turned around," someone else replied. "They'll stumble in when they're hungry, because a swamp can delay you, it can humble you, but it doesn't usually erase you. Not 14 at once, not like that." The hunters, men who knew the water, they weren't a single group of 14 marching in formation. They were two connected parties, friends of friends, linked by one central figure, Earl Maddox. Earl was the kind of man people trusted with directions and timing. Mid-40s, sun-leathered face, hands that always looked stained by work. He'd run boats, fixed motors, sold bait, and guided hunting trips the way other men guided tourists. Quiet confidence, minimal talk. Earl wasn't rich, but he had something that mattered more in the backwaters. He had knowledge, and he had a reputation for getting people home. The plan was simple. A weekend hunt that ran long. Late October 1978, still hot in the day, cooler at night, mosquitoes less relentless than summer, the swamp finally breathing. They would launch from an old ramp near a fish camp that barely qualified as a business. A few cabins, a tin roof, a propane fridge that hummed like an animal. From there, they'd push into the backwater maze, set up 2 camps on higher ground, and hunt hog and deer along the edges where fresh tracks cut through mud. 14 men total, a handful of dogs, 3 boats, aluminum, shallow draft, noisy as sin when you wanted them to be, quiet enough to glide when you didn't. They carried radios, but radios don't do miracles in swamps. Signal comes and goes with trees and distance and mood. They carried shotguns and rifles, but guns are only useful if you can see what you're aiming at. They carried confidence, and confidence is the first thing the swamp tests. The night before they launched, they gathered at the fish camp, laughing, cleaning gear, slapping mosquitoes off necks, checking fuel tanks. A man named Bobby Lark, younger than most, still with that restless energy, kept complaining about the smell of the water. "Smells like rotten pennies," he said, making a face. Earl chuckled. "That's the swamp telling you it's alive," he said. "Don't insult it." Someone joked about gators. Someone told a story about a catfish the size of a child. And at some point, a stranger appeared at the edge of the light, not stepping fully into the camp's glow, just standing where the lantern light faded into the trees. Nobody saw him arrive. That was the first detail that would bother people later. Because in the backwaters, you usually hear footsteps. Crunch of shell, snap of twig, slosh of mud. But this man seemed to form out of shadow. One of the hunters, Cliff Dwyer, a broad-shouldered guy with a mustache like a handlebar, called out, "You lost?" The man didn't answer right away. Then he took 1 step forward, enough for them to see his face. Thin, sharp, expression unreadable. He said, "Y'all headed into the black tomorrow?" Earl's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Who's asking?" The man smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was measuring. "Just asking," he said. "Weather turns fast out there." Cliff snorted. "We know." The stranger's gaze drifted over the group like he was counting them. 14. He seemed satisfied. Then he said something that sounded like advice, but landed like a warning. "Don't follow voices you don't recognize," he said. A beat of silence. Someone laughed awkwardly, trying to turn it into a joke. "What, swamp ghosts?" The stranger didn't laugh. He just stared for 1 more moment, then stepped backward into darkness as if the trees had opened for him. Earl watched the tree line long after the stranger vanished. Denial is an easy drug. Earl told himself it was nothing. A local with a weird sense of humor. A drifter. Someone trying to spook city boys. But when you run the swamp long enough, you learn a different rule. People who warn you about specific dangers usually aren't guessing. They're remembering. Day 1. Into the maze. They launched before sunrise. The water was a dark mirror broken only by lily pads and the occasional ripple that could have been wind or could have been something breathing beneath the surface. Outboard motors rumbled low. The boats cut narrow paths through reeds. Dawn came slow, not with bright color, but with a milky gray that made everything look like an old photograph. They moved in a loose convoy, Earl in front, another boat behind, and the third trailing, loaded heavier with coolers and extra fuel. The first hour felt normal. Birds calling, distant splash, the thick, sweet rot of vegetation. Then the channels tightened. Cypress knees rose like knuckles from the water. The trees grew denser. The air got warmer even though the sun hadn't fully shown itself. Earl slowed. He'd been here before, but the swamp changes. Water level shifts. Storms rearrange debris. A fallen tree can transform a familiar route into a dead end. They passed a half-submerged wooden sign nailed to a post. So weathered the letters were almost gone. Bobby leaned over the side, squinting. "What's it say?" Earl didn't answer. He kept going. A couple miles in, They reached the first fork, two narrow channels that looked almost identical. Earl chose the left. Cliff called from the second boat. "You sure?" Earl lifted a hand without looking back. "Keep tight," he said. They kept tight. And as they went deeper, the swamp began to do what it does best. It began to swallow sound. The motors became muffled. The birds got quieter. Even the men's voices dropped instinctively, as if speaking too loud would wake something. By midday, they made camp on a patch of higher ground, barely an island, more like a bump in the world. They hauled gear, set tarps, started a small cooking fire. Sweat-soaked shirts. Mosquitoes found exposed skin with religious devotion. Somebody cracked a beer too early. Someone else cleaned a rifle, careful, ritualistic. It should have been ordinary. But two things were wrong. First, the dogs. The dogs, usually frantic with scent, kept pausing, heads lifted, ears forward, whining low. Not excited whining, uncertain whining. Second, the smell. The water smell shifted from rot to something sharper. Metallic. Like pennies again. Bobby mentioned it. Earl told him to stop talking about it. Then, late afternoon, Cliff returned from scouting the tree line and said, "There's tracks." Earl looked up. "Deer?" Cliff shook his head. "Boot tracks." Earl's face tightened. "From us?" Cliff hesitated. "No," he said. "Different tread, and they're fresh." The camp went quiet. 14 hunters, 3 boats, a swamp that wasn't supposed to have anyone else in it. Earl stood, walked over to the edge of the island, and studied the mud. The boot prints were there, clean edges, recent, leading away from the water and into the trees. Then, after a few steps, vanishing. Not because the ground got hard, because something had intentionally stepped where the mud was thinner, where prints wouldn't hold. Someone who knew how to move without leaving much behind. Earl turned back to the camp. "Stay close tonight," he said. Cliff forced a laugh. "What, you think we got company?" Earl's eyes were hard. "We do," he said. And no one laughed after that. Night 1. The first mistake. The swamp at night is a different universe. The air cools, but not enough to feel kind. Frogs start up like a choir. Insects buzz in layers. Somewhere far off, something big moves through water with a slow, confident sound. The men sat around the fire, eating and talking less. Earl kept glancing toward the trees. Raymond Red Kessler. Older, gruff, the kind of man who believed fear was an insult, kept making jokes about Earl being jumpy. "Swamp got you spooked, Captain?" Red said, chuckling. Earl didn't smile. He was listening. Because sometimes the swamp goes quiet in small, unnatural pockets. Sometimes the frogs stop. Sometimes the insects drop their hum. And when that happens, it isn't because nature is resting. It's because nature is watching. Sometime after midnight, the first scream came. Not a scream like a person being hurt. A scream like a woman calling out from a distance. Long, strained, almost singing. Every man sat up. Bobby's eyes widened. "You hear that?" Cliff stood halfway, scanning the darkness. What is that?" Red scoffed. "Probably some drunk at another camp." But Earl was already on his feet. His face had gone pale. Because Earl had spent enough years on water to know one of the swamp's oldest traps. Voices carry weird over water, and sometimes they aren't what they sound like. The voice came again, closer this time. "Help me." It sounded like it was coming from the channel on the east side of the island, where the reeds were thickest, where the water was deepest. 2 of the men grabbed flashlights. Red said, "If someone's hurt..." Earl snapped, sharper than anyone had ever heard him. "Nobody moves alone." The men froze. The voice called again, then it warped, like a cheap tape dragging for half a second, before snapping back into the same woman sound again. Cliff whispered, "Did you hear that?" Earl's jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. He stared into the reeds and said, low, "It's bait." Bobby shook his head. "That ain't—" Another voice joined in, a man's voice now, distant, angry. "Hey, hey, over here!" Red swore under his breath. "That's a man," he said. "That's real." Earl stepped toward the edge of camp, flashlight in hand. "We look together," he said. 2 by 2. Nobody goes past the water line." Red didn't wait. That was the mistake. Red grabbed his shotgun and pushed into the reeds, muttering, "Ain't nobody gonna die out here if I can help it." "Red!" Earl hissed, but Red was already swallowed by darkness. The reeds rustled, a splash, then silence. No voice calling, no footsteps, no swearing, just the frogs starting again, hesitant, like they were checking if it was safe to sing. Earl stood rigid, flashlight beam cutting through reeds. "Red?" Earl called. No answer. Cliff stepped closer. "He's messing with us." Earl didn't believe that for a second. He waded 1 step into the water, then stopped himself, forcing restraint like a man gripping a hot stove. He called again. "Red." Still nothing. Then, farther out, a soft sound. Not a voice, a click, like a flashlight being turned off. Earl's stomach dropped, because that meant someone else had been out there with light. Someone who knew to kill it. The camp stayed awake until dawn. No one joked. No one slept. They watched the water and the reeds and the tree line like men waiting for a verdict. When morning finally came, the first thing they found was Red's hat, floating near the reeds, slowly turning in a lazy circle. No blood, no body, just the hat, as if the swamp had tossed it back with mild contempt. Earl picked it up with 2 fingers like it might burn. Cliff's face went tight. "He fell," Cliff said, desperate to make it simple. "He slipped, got tangled." Earl stared into the reeds where Red had vanished. Then he said, "Flat." "Red didn't fall." Because the reeds weren't broken. The mud didn't show a struggle. It showed 1 set of boot prints going in, and none coming out. And something else, lighter, careful, stepping around the edges. Earl made a decision right there. They were leaving. Not later. Now. They would pack, load, and go back the way they came. Whatever this was, human, animal, something in between, it had taken 1 man in a matter of minutes. They weren't going to donate 13 more, but the swamp doesn't care about your decisions. It only cares about your timing, and they were already late. Earl moves like a man trying not to let panic touch his hands. He doesn't shout orders. He keeps his voice low, firm, almost gentle, because he knows loudness spreads fear faster than mosquitoes spread itch. "Pack light," he says. "Only what matters. Tarps, water, fuel. Leave the rest. Coolers stay. Extra ammo stays. Camp chairs stay. Anything that makes noise stays." The men move quickly, but the swamp makes even quick feel slow. Mud sucking at boots, straps snagging on branches, sweat pooling under collars even in morning air. Bobby keeps glancing at the reeds like he expects Red to stumble back out, laughing, calling them fools. It doesn't happen. Cliff keeps scanning the tree line, shotgun held across his chest like a habit. 2 others, Nolan and Pete, wade out to the boats to check the lines and the fuel tanks. Earl watches them like a hawk watches rabbits. "Don't go past the cypress knees," he calls. They nod, more serious now. The water is low enough that the cypress roots stab up like broken teeth. You can tear your shin open if you step wrong. But as Nolan reaches the lead boat, he stops. Just stops. Earl's stomach tightens. "Something wrong?" Earl asks. Nolan doesn't answer right away. He leans over the boat, lifts the fuel cap, and freezes. Then he turns his face toward Earl, and Earl sees it, confusion sliding into dread. "The tank's empty," Nolan says. He twists the cap again and smells it, fresh gasoline. Beside the hull, the mud is damp in a thin crescent, like someone spilled fuel in a hurry. Cliff snorts, sharp. "We filled those last night." "I know," Nolan says. "It's empty." Pete checks the second boat. Same thing. He shakes it, as if fuel might appear if you insist hard enough. Nothing. The third boat, loaded with heavier gear, the one they plan to use as a floating mule, has fuel, but not enough. Not enough to tow 2 dead boats through tight channels. Not enough to make it back to the ramp if the water gets choppy or the path forces detours. Not enough to outrun whatever has been stepping around their camp. Bobby's voice climbs, thin with disbelief. "How's that even possible?" Earl doesn't answer, because the answer is already inside him like a cold stone. Possible means someone did it. Someone drained the fuel. Someone watched them sleep, if you can call that night sleep, and quietly turned the camp's escape into a problem. Cliff takes a step forward, anger flaring. "Who the hell?" Earl cuts him off with a look. "Quiet," he says. Not because he's being polite, because the swamp loves it when men argue. Arguments split attention. Split attention splits people. Earl thinks fast. They can't stay. They can't reliably go. So the only thing left is the ugly option. They have to carry fuel. They have to siphon from the third boat into portable cans and make the other boats functional enough to move. Just enough. But siphoning takes time. Time is what they're running out of. Earl points. "You," he says to 2 men. "Watch the trees. Don't watch each other. Watch the trees." He points at Bobby. "You stay near me." Bobby nods too quickly, like he's grateful to be assigned something, anything. Cliff and another man, Santos, start siphoning fuel with a hose, faces tight, hands shaking slightly as they work. The hose gurgles. Fuel drips. The smell hits the air, sharp, chemical, unmistakably human, and as soon as that smell spreads, the dogs begin to whine again. Low, urgent. Earl's eyes flick to them. The dogs are staring toward the same place Red disappeared. Same reeds, same black water, same silence. Then the reeds move, not like wind, like something parting them, slow, deliberate. A shape appears, too low to be a standing man, too tall to be a gator. Cliff's breath catches. Someone raises a gun. Earl's voice snaps, controlled but hard. "No," he says, "because firing into reeds is how you waste ammo and invite chaos." The shape pauses. For one heartbeat, it's just a dark silhouette against darker shadow. Then it retreats, back into the reeds, without a splash, without a scramble, without the hurried movement of an animal that's been startled. It withdraws like a person deciding they've been seen and simply filing that away. Earl's throat tightens. He feels the swamp closing. Fuel finishes siphoning. The men cap the cans, hands slick. Earl points again. "Load," he says. They load fast. They push the boats off the mud. The hulls scrape over something hard beneath the water. The sound makes everyone flinch. Earl climbs into the lead boat with Bobby. Cliff takes the second boat with Santos. The third boat, with the remaining men and the dogs, trails behind. Heavier, slower, doing the work of pulling the others through narrow turns. Earl starts the motor. It coughs again, then catches, thin, fragile, like a dying man's breath. He doesn't waste time warming it. He pushes forward into the channel. The boats slide out, one after another, leaving their camp behind like a skin they're shedding. Earl doesn't look back. He can't afford to, because the swamp doesn't chase like a predator you can see. It just rearranges the world until you realize you're lost. And when you realize you're lost, it's already working on you. They go east first, trying to retrace the route, but the channel doesn't feel the same. Earl recognizes trees, but not in the way you recognize landmarks, more like the way you recognize faces in a nightmare, familiar, warped, unreliable. He keeps his eyes forward, reading the water like text. Bobby sits rigid, scanning left and right, gun across his lap. "Earl," Bobby whispers, "that ain't the same bend." Earl doesn't answer immediately. He's staring at something, a branch tied to a cypress knee. Not naturally broken, tied. A marker, a sign. It's fresh, the bark still pale where it was cut. Earl's mouth goes dry. Because that marker isn't one of his. Someone else is marking the swamp. Someone else is guiding, either themselves or the hunters. Earl accelerates slightly. The motor whines. The third boat struggles to keep pace. Cliff shouts across the water, "Slow down!" Earl raises a hand without turning. Then the channel narrows. The water slows. The reeds get taller. The air gets hotter. And the frogs, oddly, go quiet. Earl feels it, that pocket of unnatural stillness. He eases the motor down. The boats drift. No one speaks. Even breathing feels rude. Then, from ahead, something floats into view. A small object, white against black water. Bobby leans forward, squinting. Earl's stomach turns. It's Red's boot. One boot. Laces still tied. Mud caked on the sole. It bobs gently like a cruel little buoy. Bobby makes a sound. Half choke, half prayer. Cliff's boat bumps lightly into Earl's as they drift closer. Cliff's face is tight, eyes locked on the boot. "You see that?" Cliff whispers. Earl doesn't answer. He reaches out with the butt of his shotgun and nudges the boot away. He doesn't want it in the boat. It feels like an invitation. The boot drifts aside and turns, toe pointing deeper into the reeds. Like an arrow. Like a direction. Earl swallows. "Don't follow it," he says. Bobby nods, but his eyes flick nervously toward where the boot points anyway, as if the swamp is trying to hypnotize them with small symbols. Earl turns the motor slightly, choosing a different branch of the channel, a route that should, by his memory, lead back toward the larger slough. But after 10 minutes, the water becomes shallower. The prop starts ticking against something below. Earl curses softly and cuts the motor. He grabs a pole and pushes. Mud resists. The boat slows. The second boat behind bumps them again. Cliff swears under his breath. The third boat is forced to stop too, the whole convoy now jammed in a narrow, shallow throat of water. Earl looks ahead. A fallen cypress spans the channel like a barricade. Not driftwood, a whole tree. Heavy, green leaves still on some branches. Fresh, as if it fell last night, or was pushed. Bobby whispers, "That weren't there before." Earl's eyes trace the trunk. The bark is scraped, long, parallel marks, not from wind, not from natural fall, from being dragged. On one broken branch, a pale strand of rope is snagged, too clean, too deliberate to be storm debris. Something has moved this tree here. Something has blocked them. Cliff says, louder now, unable to keep fear from hardening into anger, "This is a damn trap." Earl raises a finger. "Lower your voice," he says. But Cliff's hands are shaking. "We can't go forward," he snaps. "We can't go back. We're stuck." Earl's mind races. He looks at the bank. Muddy, thick, with palmetto and roots. If they get out to drag the tree, they're vulnerable. If they stay in the boats, they're sitting ducks. Earl makes a decision that tastes like ash. "We carry around," he says. Cliff stares. "Carry around what?" Earl points to the bank. "We get out," he says. "We move along the edge. We pull the boats through the brush past the trunk." It's miserable work. It's slow. But it keeps them together and keeps them moving, and movement right now is survival. They climb out, boots sinking. The mud grabs at ankles like hands. Mosquitoes swarm instantly, furious at fresh blood. Men grunt and strain, hauling boats inch by inch. Metal scrapes on roots. Branches slap faces. Someone's elbow catches a thorn and draws a thin line of blood. No one complains. They can't spare breath. Earl keeps looking back and forth. Boat, tree line, water, eyes moving like a scanning light. Bobby stays close, breathing fast. Cliff mutters curses like prayers. They get the lead boat past the trunk. Then the second. Then the third. Heavy and stubborn. The whole process takes longer than it should, like time is thickening too. Finally, they shove the third boat free, and it splashes back into deeper water. Everyone pauses, panting, sweat dripping into eyes. Earl climbs back in, hands shaking slightly now, whether from exertion or fear he can't tell. He starts the motor again. It catches. They push forward. And for a moment, just a moment, Earl feels the faintest lift of hope. Then Bobby speaks, voice trembling. "Earl," he says. Earl glances at him. "What?" Bobby points behind them. Earl turns his head and sees something that makes his blood go cold. Their footprints in the mud, the prints they made while hauling the boats, are already softening, the edges collapsing as water seeps back into the churned earth. Black slurry rises and smears the tread marks until the ground looks untouched. And behind that, in the brush line, a figure stands. Still, watching, too far to see a face clearly. But close enough to know it's human-shaped. It lifts one hand, not a wave, a signal. Then it steps back into Palmetto and disappears. Cliff sees it too and makes a sound like a man about to break. Santos raises his rifle, aiming into the brush. Earl snaps, "No!" Santos freezes. Earl's voice is low, absolute. "We fire, we scatter," he says. "We scatter, we die." They keep moving. They keep moving because stopping feels like letting the swamp catch up. But as they go, Earl begins to understand the trap isn't just physical. It's psychological. It's control. Someone is shaping their choices, blocking channels, draining fuel, leaving objects like boots and markers, pressuring them into routes they didn't choose. And if someone is doing that, it means someone wants them deeper, or wants them contained, or wants them gone. The swamp doesn't kill like a clean blade. It kills by narrowing options until you make the wrong decision yourself. They hit a wider slough by late afternoon. Open water, relatively speaking, still ringed by trees, but with space to breathe. Earl stops the convoy for a moment, letting the motors idle. "We rest," he says. 5 minutes. Cliff glares. "We don't got 5 minutes." Earl looks at him hard. "We do if we want to make it out alive," he says. "Drink water, check gear, then we move." The men drink from canteens. Hands shake. Eyes are red from sweat and bugs. Bobby's lips are cracked. The dogs pant, tongues lolling. Earl forces himself to slow his breathing. He looks up at the sky through the trees. Clouds are gathering. Not thunderheads yet, but thickening. The swamp's weather turning. It's another ticking clock. They move again, and that's when the radio crackles. A burst of static, then a voice, thin, broken. "Earl! Earl Maddox." Earl jerks, grabs the radio, thumb shaking. "This is Earl," he says. "Who is that?" More static. Then, It's Tommy Williams." Tommy is one of the hunters from the other party, the second camp that was supposed to be set deeper, on higher ground near a dry ridge. Earl's heart pounds. "Where are you?" he demands. Tommy's voice is ragged, breathy, like he's running while talking. We can't." Static. "They took..." Earl leans closer to the speaker. "Tommy, who took who?" A shriek of static like tearing cloth. Tommy's voice returns for half a second, panicked. Don't come. Then something else comes through the radio. Not static. A sound like wet breathing close to the mic. Then a soft click. The transmission ends. Earl stares at the radio like it's just grown teeth. Cliff's face is pale. What was that? Earl's throat works. Other camp, he says. They're in trouble. Santos swears under his breath. We gotta go help. Earl feels the trap tightening. If they go toward Tommy, they go deeper. If they don't, they abandon men, friends, and also lose the only evidence that someone else is alive and communicating. The swamp has turned their morality into a lever. Bobby whispers, If we don't go, we're leaving them. Earl stares at the water. Leonard, one of the quieter men, older, says softly, If we do go, we might all die. That's the truth nobody wants. Earl makes another decision that feels like swallowing glass. We go, he says. Cliff snaps, furious, terrified. You just said we leaving. Earl looks at him. We leave now. We still don't know how to get out, he says. We already being guided. Maybe Tommy knows something. Maybe he got a route. Maybe he got proof. Cliff shakes his head, eyes wild. Or maybe it's bait, he says, like the voices last night. Earl doesn't deny it. He just says, Either way, we ain't getting out by guessing. He turns the lead boat. The convoy follows. And as they head toward the deeper backwater, the air gets heavier, like the swamp is pleased, because they've chosen the direction it wanted. They find the ridge near sunset, or what should be the ridge. Earl recognizes the general area. Higher ground, fewer cypress, more scrub. But when they reach it, there's no campfire smoke, no voices, no movement. Just trees and shadow and the thick hush of a place that has recently been emptied. They beach the boats and step onto muddy ground. The smell hits immediately. Not blood, not rot. Something else. A smell like damp cloth left too long in a closed box. Like old metal, like fear that has been sweating for hours. Earl raises a hand, signaling quiet. The men spread slightly, but not far, forming a loose line. Flashlights click on as darkness thickens. Beams sweep trunks and palmetto fronds. Bobby whispers, Tommy? No answer. Earl steps forward and sees something that makes him stop. A tarp. Their kind of tarp, tied to trees, but it's torn. Long rips, as if something sharp clawed through it. Under it, sleeping bags half unrolled, abandoned. A cooler tipped on its side, ice melted into mud. A lantern smashed. A scattering of personal items, a pocket knife, a glove, a pack of cigarettes. A camp emptied in a hurry. Earl crouches and touches the mud. There are tracks, too many. Men's boot prints, running, slipping, dogs. And then, other marks, lighter steps, barely there, as if someone moved around the chaos without participating in it. Earl stands slowly. Cliff's voice is a whisper now, stripped of bravado. They gone. Santos shakes his head, denial fighting with reality. They can't all be gone. Earl looks toward the trees and sees something hanging from a low branch, a strip of cloth, tied like a marker, like the branch Earl saw earlier, like someone is leaving breadcrumbs. Earl's jaw tightens. This isn't random. This is staged. The swamp is being used like a theater. He steps closer and sees the cloth is torn from a shirt. Flannel familiar pattern. Tommy's shirt. Earl's chest tightens. He whispers, Tommy! Then the dogs start barking, not frantic, not excited, defensive. They're staring toward a darker patch of trees beyond the torn tarp. Earl raises his shotgun. Cliff raises his. The line tightens. Bobby's breath comes fast, loud. From the darkness, a voice comes, low and calm. Y'all shouldn't have come. Every man freezes. The voice isn't the earlier woman voice, not a mimic, a real man's voice. Close, too close to not have been there the entire time. Earl's flashlight beam swings, searching. "Who's there?" Earl demands. The voice chuckles softly. "Too late for that," it says. Earl's pulse hammers. "Show yourself," Cliff snarls, unable to hold back. A figure steps into the edge of the flashlight beam. A man. Thin, mud-streaked, wearing a hat pulled low. Not Tommy, not anyone Earl recognizes. His face is partly shadowed by the brim, but the eyes glint. He holds a rifle loosely, like it's not even heavy. Behind him, another figure, half hidden, and another. Earl's stomach drops. There are multiple men out here, not one swamp hermit, not one freak accident. A group. Cliff's hands shake on his shotgun. Santos's jaw clenches. Bobby whispers, "Earl." Earl keeps his gun raised but doesn't fire. He says, "Where are the other hunters?" The thin man smiles slightly. "They crossed a line," he says. Earl's voice hardens. "This ain't your land." The man tilts his head, amused. "Everything out here is somebody's," he says. "You just didn't know whose." Earl's mind races. Illegal operation, a hidden grow, moonshine, smuggling, something that needs isolation, and hunters, men with guns and curiosity, are the worst possible witnesses. Earl swallows, forcing calm. "We'll leave," he says. "Right now. We didn't see nothing." The man's smile fades. "That's not how it works," he says. "You already here." Cliff's voice breaks with anger and fear. "So what? You gonna—" Earl snaps. "Cliff!" Too late. The second figure shifts. A third steps wider, and in the dimness Earl sees it. Their movements are coordinated. They've done this before. They're not improvising. They're controlling. Earl realizes with sick clarity that the drained fuel, the blocked channel, the voices, those weren't the swamp. Those were men using the swamp as a weapon. Earl's voice drops. "How many of you?" he asks. The thin man laughs softly. "Enough," he says. Then the swamp itself seems to change. Not magically, mechanically. A sound like a switch, a click, and from the tree line around the torn tarp, more lights flare. Flashlights, sweeping beams that blind. Men step out from shadow like they were always there. Earl counts quickly in his head. 4, 6, 8. He can't see all of them. The hunters tense, guns raised, but Earl understands the problem immediately. If they fire, it becomes a firefight in the dark, in mud, surrounded with unknown numbers, unknown angles. A firefight in swamp country is chaos, and chaos is what the ambushers want. Earl keeps his weapon up, but doesn't shoot. He says, "Listen." The thin man interrupts, voice sharp now. "Drop it," he says. Cliff's eyes go wild. "No." A beam hits Cliff's face, blinding him. Cliff flinches. In that flinch, a shot cracks, not from Cliff, from the tree line. The sound is explosive in the humid air. Cliff jerks and falls backward into mud, not bleeding theatrically, just collapsing like his strings got cut. Bobby screams. Santos shouts. The dogs bark frantically, lunging at leashes. Earl's brain screams at him to fire, but firing means death for everyone. Earl raises his free hand, palm out. "Stop!" he roars. The thin man holds up a hand to his own people, calm like a conductor. Silence returns. Thick and unnatural. Earl's eyes lock on Cliff in the mud. Cliff's chest rises once, then not again. The swamp doesn't care. The men in the trees don't care. Earl's throat tightens with rage and grief so fast it almost makes him choke, but he forces his voice steady. "What do you want?" Earl says. The thin man steps closer, boots quiet in mud. "Your guns," he says. "Your radios, your boats." Earl spits. "You can't take boats out of here." The man smiles again. "We don't need to take him out," he says. "We just need you not to." Santos snarls. "You killed—" Another flashlight beam hits Santos's face. Earl throws a hard look at Santos. "Shut up." Santos's lips press together, shaking. Earl's mind moves like a desperate animal, searching for a hole. If they hand over guns, they're helpless. If they refuse, they're dead. If they stall, maybe, the swamp will give them something. A storm, a distraction, a gator, anything. The thin man waits, patient. That patience tells Earl everything. They have time. They planned this. Earl lowers his shotgun slowly, like he's surrendering. Bobby whimpers. "Earl!" Earl doesn't look at him. He says, "We put him down," he says. "Easy." The thin man nods. "Do it." Earl sets his shotgun on the mud. Santos does the same. The other men follow, hands trembling, faces rigid with humiliation and terror. The dogs strain, growling, sensing danger. The thin man gestures with his rifle. "Now," he says, "you're gonna walk." Earl stares. "Walk where?" The man's voice is almost bored. "To the water," he says. "Single file." Bobby whispers, "No, no." Earl's jaw clenches. He knows what "to the water" means. In swamps, water is control. Water slows you, water separates you, water drowns sound. Earl has one last lever. He says, "We got hurt, man," he says, nodding to Cliff's body. "We take him." The thin man's eyes flick to Cliff and show no emotion. "No," he says. Earl's chest tightens. Earl counts heads without moving his lips. 14 went in. Red is gone. Cliff is down in the mud. That leaves 12 men still breathing. 12 men trying not to show they're terrified. Earl says quietly, "You don't have to do this." The thin man chuckles. "Already doing it," he says. And then he speaks a line that makes Earl realize this isn't just practical, it's personal. "Hunters," the man says, "always think they're the ones doing the taking." Earl's skin crawls, because that's not business logic. That's ideology. That's someone who enjoys flipping the script. They begin to walk, single file, flashlights in their faces, men with rifles behind them. The swamp's chorus starts up again. Frogs, insects, as if nature is trying to cover the sound of human cruelty. They reach the waterline. The channel here is narrow, black, slow-moving. A boat sits half-hidden in reeds. A small skiff, silent, ready. Not theirs. The ambusher's boat. The thin man points. "2 at a time," he says. "In!" Earl's mind screams. 2 at a time means separation. It means you lose numbers. It means you lose control. The first 2 hunters are shoved into the skiff. It drifts out into the channel. The flashlight beams follow it until it disappears behind reeds. Then the second pair goes. Then the third. Bobby's breathing becomes a panicked rattle. Earl leans close to him, whispering so softly it's almost air. "When you get chance," Earl says, "you run." Bobby's eyes are wild. "How?" Earl doesn't have an answer. He just says, "You run anyway." Because sometimes survival is not a plan. It's an instinct you unleash. Earl watches as more pairs are sent away, swallowed by reeds. He hears a distant splash once, then nothing. No voices, no gunshots, nothing. That silence is worse, because it means whatever is happening isn't loud. It's controlled, systematic. Earl becomes one of the last pairs. He and Bobby are pushed toward the skiff. Earl steps in first. Bobby hesitates. A rifle butt nudges him hard. Bobby stumbles in. The skiff drifts out. The reeds close behind like a curtain. And for the first time, Earl can't see the other hunters. Can't see Santos. Can't see Nolan. Can't see anyone. The swamp has turned their group into fragments. Earl grips the edge of the skiff. knuckles white, listening. The man at the stern isn't the thin leader, just another guard, silent and flat-eyed, poling them forward. Earl keeps his gaze on the water, scanning for movement. They pass cypress knees that jut like bones. They pass a floating log that isn't a log. It's too smooth, too alive. Then it slips under. Earl's heart hammers. He is armed with nothing but his body and his will. The skiff glides into a small pocket of open water. A dark clearing. No wind. The air feels dead. And in the center of that clearing is something Earl didn't expect, a platform, wooden, crude, built between trees. It sits low over the water, supported by posts. A hidden dock, a hidden work site, evidence that someone has been building out here for a long time. The skiff bumps the platform gently. The man at the stern gestures. "Out," he says. Earl steps out slowly. Bobby follows, shaking. On the platform, in dim lantern light, Earl sees barrels, crates, tarps, a makeshift operation, not a fisherman's stash, something bigger, something illegal. And then Earl sees the other hunters, or what's left of them, a cluster, tied or held at gunpoint, faces pale, eyes wide. Santos stands among them, jaw clenched, a bruise swelling on his cheek. Nolan looks like he's been sick. Pete's hands are trembling. Leonard's face is grim, resigned. They're alive. For now. Earl's chest tightens with relief that immediately curdles into dread. Because alive means they're still deciding what to do with them. The thin man steps into the lantern light, closer now. Earl can see his face more clearly. Middle-aged, eyes that don't blink much, a mouth that seems permanently bored by morality. He looks at Earl like he's evaluating livestock. "You Earl?" he asks. Earl doesn't answer right away. He tries to hold on to pride, but pride is useless here. He nods once. "Yeah." The man smiles slightly. "You the guide?" he says. Earl's jaw tightens. "I'm the one trying to get us out," he says. The man chuckles. "Too late," he says again, like it's his favorite phrase. Earl stares at the barrels. "What is this?" he asks. The man shrugs. "Business," he says, echoing the exact tone of men who think that word excuses everything. Earl's eyes narrow. "You killin' men for business?" The man's smile fades. "Don't moralize at me," he says. "You come out here to kill." Earl's throat tightens. Because yes, they came to hunt. But hunting animals and hunting men are not the same. And the fact this man equates them tells Earl something terrifying. In this man's mind, the hunters have forfeited their right to complain. Because they are takers. Because they carry guns. Because they assume the swamp belongs to them. The thin man steps closer, voice low. "Here's the truth," he says. "We don't need 14 witnesses." Earl feels his blood go cold. Bobby makes a choked sound. Santos's jaw clenches so hard it looks like it might crack. The thin man gestures toward the water. "This swamp don't give back what it takes," he says. "So nobody asks questions." Earl's voice is tight. "People will come look," he says. "Families, deputies." The thin man laughs softly. "They can look," he says. "They can't find." Earl realizes the man is right, partially. Search parties can get lost, bodies can sink, evidence can dissolve, the swamp erases. But 14 men missing is big, it's loud, it's a headline. Earl's mind scrambles for leverage again. He says, "Let him go," he says, nodding toward the others. "Keep me. I'll take the blame. I'll tell folks I got them lost. I'll—" The thin man stares at him like Earl just offered him a child's toy. "You think you can lie that big?" he says. Earl's voice cracks with anger. "I'm trying to save lives." The thin man steps in close, breath smelling like tobacco and damp. "You already failed," he whispers. Then he straightens and nods to one of his men. That man steps forward, grabs Pete by the arm, yanks him away from the group. Pete stumbles, panicked. "No, wait!" The thin man's voice is calm, almost instructional. "This is how it works," he says. "We take one. The rest learn quiet." Pete's eyes meet Earl's for a fraction of a second, and in that look, Earl sees it. Pure animal fear. Pete is dragged toward the edge of the platform. Not shoved off, not shot, just dragged away into reeds, into darkness. Pete's voice rises, begging, then screaming, then abruptly cuts off like a switch. Silence returns. The swamp resumes its chorus like nothing happened. Bobby's knees buckle slightly. Santos breathes hard, shoulders shaking. Earl's hands clench until nails bite skin. The thin man looks at them all and says, "You see?" Earl's voice is raw. "You gonna do that to all of us?" The thin man shrugs. "Maybe," he says. "Maybe not. Depends who behaves." Earl stares at him with hate so hot it almost blinds. But hate doesn't change physics. They are on a platform in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by men who know the swamp, stripped of guns and radios, separated from boats. Earl realizes something else. Those voice tricks last night? That wasn't just a swamp myth. That was these men. They were out there calling, mimicking, baiting, a recorder, a loudspeaker, maybe a woman working with them. Whatever the method, it's human, and it's deliberate. Earl thinks of the stranger at the fish camp, warning, "Don't follow voices you don't recognize." It wasn't folklore. It was insider knowledge. And now the swamp has become a controlled environment, like a cage disguised as wilderness. Night deepens. Lantern light flickers. The thin man orders his men to tie the hunter's hands, not cruelly, just firmly. Rope bites wrists. Earl watches as one of the ambushers checks a watch. A watch out here feels obscene. Timekeeping in a place designed to dissolve time. The thin man says, "We move before the weather turns," he says. Earl's eyes flick up again. Clouds have thickened. The air tastes like rain. The platform shudders slightly as water laps harder against posts. The swamp is changing again, and these men are preparing to use that change. They load the hunters into 2 skiffs now, not pairs. Groups, more efficient, less patience. Earl is shoved into the first skiff, with Bobby, Santos, Nolan, Leonard, and 2 others. The second skiff takes the remaining hunters and dogs, the dogs now quiet, subdued, as if they've learned barking doesn't help. The skiffs move through channels so narrow the reeds slap faces. Earl tries to memorize turns. Left at the fork. Right after the dead snag. Straight under the bent cypress. But it's impossible. Everything looks the same in the dark. That's why men hide things here. That's why men bury stories here. Eventually they reach land again. Higher ground. A dry ridge with pines. A hidden camp, more established than the first. Tin roof structures half camouflaged with palmetto. A generator hum faintly, muffled. Earl's stomach drops. These men aren't just passing through. They live here, or they operate here regularly. That means the swamp has been used as a shield for a long time. And no one stopped it because no one knew where to look. The hunters are marched into a shed. Rough wood walls. A single bulb hanging from a wire. The smell of fuel and wet rope. They're forced to sit on the floor. Bobby's breathing comes in broken gasps. Santos's eyes are bright with rage and helplessness. Nolan's lips move like he's praying. Leonard stares at the dirt floor, face set. A man already rehearsing his own death. Earl sits with his back against the wall, mind racing so hard it almost feels calm. He looks around the shed and sees details, a nail hammered half in, half out. Leonard's eyes linger on it, An old trick forming in his mind. A crack in the wall where moonlight slides through. A rusted metal drum in the corner. A loose plank near the floor that doesn't sit right. Escape is an obsession now. Even if it's impossible, he has to find the angle. The door opens. The thin man steps in, holding a radio. Earl's throat tightens. The thin man raises the radio and smiles. "Y'all got friends?" he says. Earl's heart stutters. If the thin man has their radio, he can mimic calls. He can lure searchers later. He can create false trails. He can play the swamp like an instrument. The thin man clicks the radio and speaks, voice smooth. "Fish camp," he says. "This is Earl Maddox." Earl's blood turns to ice. "Because the man is using Earl's name like a mask." Static answers. Then a voice, faint, relieved, desperate. "Earl, thank God. Where are you? Y'all okay?" That voice belongs to Harold, the fish camp owner. Harold is older, stubborn, has seen men get lost before. He would have been the first to start calling. The thin man holds the radio like he's enjoying it. He speaks again in a rough imitation of Earl's calm. "We okay," he says. "We just turned around. We're coming back. Don't bring nobody." Earl's stomach clenches. Harold's voice is shaky. "No, Earl, Sheriff's on the way." The thin man interrupts, voice sharper. "Don't," he says. "We fine. Don't." There's a pause. Then Harold's voice comes back, confused. "Earl, you don't sound—" The thin man clicks the radio off. He smiles at Earl. "See how easy it is?" he says. "We make time." Earl lunges. Not a heroic lunge. A desperate one. He launches off the wall toward the thin man, hands tied, using his shoulder like a battering ram. For a split second, it works. The thin man stumbles. The radio slips from his hand. Bobby shouts. Santos surges too, but the ambushers are ready. Two men slam Earl down. A boot pins his shoulder. A fist hits the side of his head. Not repeatedly, not sadistic, just hard enough to reset the hierarchy. Earl tastes blood in his mouth. The thin man straightens, breathing heavier now, eyes no longer bored. He steps close, crouches, and looks Earl in the face. "You still think you in charge," he whispers. Earl spits blood onto the dirt. The thin man's expression tightens. He stands and nods to his men. "Take him," he says. Hands grab Earl's arms, haul him up. Bobby cries out, "Earl!" Earl twists his head toward Bobby. "Stay alive," Earl says, voice thick. Then he is dragged out of the shed, into night, into wet air, into pine shadows. Earl's feet stumble on roots, his heart hammers. He tries to plant his boots, slow them, but they yank harder. They bring him to the edge of a cleared patch where the ground slopes down into black water again. The thin man stands behind him. "You wanted to save lives," the thin man says softly. "Here's your lesson." Earl's throat tightens. He hears movement behind him, other hunters being pulled out too. He turns his head and sees Santos dragged to another spot. Nolan dragged to another. They're separating them again, stripping away the last comfort of being seen by someone who knows your name. Earl's mind screams. He tries to pull against the men holding him. The rope cuts his wrists. He looks up at the sky. No stars, just cloud. Then he hears it, a distant sound. Engines, not boats, trucks. On a road, far away, but there. The world outside the swamp. Searchers, sheriff maybe, Harold, families. The thin man hears it too. He tilts his head, annoyed. "Time's up," he says. Earl's breath catches. Then the thin man does something that isn't loud. He simply steps forward and pushes Earl. Earl stumbles. He hits the slope, slides in mud. He tries to catch himself. His hands are tied. He can't. He slides into water. Cold shock hits his chest. He inhales involuntarily and swallows swamp water. Blackness wraps him. He thrashes, trying to find ground, but the bottom drops. Hands tied means no strong swim. He kicks hard, head breaking the surface for a gasp. He sees the thin man standing above, silhouette against darker sky, watching like a man watching a test. Earl tries to speak. Water chokes him. He kicks again. He hears a splash nearby. Santos? Another hunter? Then something bumps his leg. Not a gator bite. A slow, heavy contact. A log? No. Too alive. Earl's body locks in terror. He tries to kick away. The rope pulls his wrists painfully. He feels himself being grabbed by the water itself, pulled down. The last thing Earl sees before darkness takes him is the thin man turning away, already bored again, already moving on. And Earl understands a final, brutal truth. The swamp is not the killer. It's the accomplice. The killer is human. The swamp just makes it easy to disappear. Inside the shed, Bobby hears the splashes. He hears the muffled shout, Santos's voice maybe. Then silence. The bulb swings slightly from the ceiling, casting moving shadows like bodies. Bobby's eyes go wide. He begins to sob without sound. Leonard clamps his jaw, eyes wet but hard. Nolan whispers a prayer faster now. Bobby's mind breaks into one clear thought. If they stay, they die. If they run, they might die. But might is better than certain. He looks at the loose plank near the floor again. He had noticed it earlier. Now it becomes the whole universe. Bobby shifts, inching closer, pretending his movement is just fear. One of the guards outside laughs at something, distracted. Bobby presses his shoulder against the plank. It gives slightly. His heart leaps. He shifts again. The plank loosens more. Leonard sees it and locks eyes with Bobby. Leonard doesn't speak. He just nods once, a quiet approval. Bobby pushes again. The plank pops free with a soft crack, too loud in that tense silence. Bobby freezes, no immediate reaction. The guard's laughter continues outside. Bobby exhales shakily. Behind the plank is a gap, low, narrow, a crawl space, not big enough for everyone, but big enough for one man at a time. Bobby whispers, almost inaudible, "Now." Leonard moves first. Not because he wants glory, because he knows young men freeze, old men move. Leonard slides toward the gap, shoulders scraping wood, breath held. He disappears into darkness like a man crawling into his own rebirth. Bobby follows. His body shakes so hard he thinks the shed will hear him. He squeezes into the gap. Wood scrapes his back. Mud smears his face. The air is thick and stale. But it's freedom-shaped. He crawls, slow, quiet. Every movement feels like thunder. He reaches the other side and pushes up into wet grass behind the shed. Night air hits his lungs like a slap. He doesn't stand. He crawls away on elbows, keeping low. He hears shouting suddenly. One of the guards has noticed the plank. Boots stomp. A flashlight beam sweeps the ground. Bobby freezes, face pressed into wet soil, tasting grit. The beam passes over him and keeps going. He waits. His heart pounds so hard he thinks it will glow. Leonard's hand touches Bobby's ankle, guiding. They crawl together into pine shadow. Then, once they are farther, they rise to crouches and begin to move, careful, silent, slipping between trees. They don't know where they are. They don't know where the road is. But they know one thing: a way. They move downhill, toward the damp air, toward water. Because the road noise came from somewhere, and roads are usually near higher ground. Leonard leads, listening. Bobby follows, eyes wide, lungs burning. Behind them the camp erupts. Shouts, boots, dogs barking. The ambushers have noticed. They are hunting now, and now the roles have reversed. Bobby and Leonard are prey. They reach a channel. Blackwater again, silent. Leonard stops, staring. Bobby whispers, We can't swim. Leonard's face is grim. We don't got choice, he whispers. But then Leonard sees something, a small skiff tied loosely to a cypress, not the main boats, not the hunter's big aluminum ones. A spare. Bobby's breath catches. We take it. Leonard nods. They creep closer. Leonard's wrists are raw where the rope bit. Inside the shed, he'd been worrying the knot against a nail head, millimeter by millimeter. Crawling through the gap finished the job. One loop loosened just enough. He works his hands, exhales, and slips free. Leonard whispers, "Give me your hands." Bobby holds his wrists out. Leonard works the rope quickly, fingers shaking but skilled, untying a knot that isn't complicated, just tight. Bobby's hands free. He feels like he has been given back a piece of himself. They untie Leonard too, then they grab the skiff and ease it into water. No motor, just a pole. Good. Quiet. They push off, sliding into the channel just as flashlights burst through trees behind them. A shout. Over there! A beam hits the water. Bobby ducks instinctively, heart exploding. Leonard pushes harder with the pole, muscles straining. The skiff glides forward. A shot cracks. Splinters bark from a tree near the waterline. Bobby flinches. Leonard doesn't stop. They drift into reeds. The reeds swallow them. The flashlight beams sweep, frantic now. The swamp for the first time feels like it's helping Bobby. Because the swamp hides. It confuses. It muffles sound. It turns pursuit into guessing. Leonard whispers, "Don't breathe loud." Bobby clamps his mouth shut, breathing through nose, slow. The skiff slides deeper. The channel twists. Leonard pushes, steering by instinct. They can't see far. They can only feel direction. And then, ahead, Bobby sees something that makes his stomach drop. A light. A lantern on a platform. The same kind of platform Earl was taken to. Bobby whispers, "No." Leonard's eyes widen. They have drifted toward the operation again. The swamp is not giving them a clean exit. It is looping them back toward the monster. Leonard tries to steer away, but the channel narrows. Reeds thick. The pole catches on roots. The skiff bumps a submerged log. The sound is soft, but in this world it's a drum. From ahead, a voice calls out. Not the woman voice, a man's voice. "Who's there?" Leonard freezes. Bobby's chest tightens. Leonard lowers the pole and lets the skiff drift, hoping stillness equals invisibility. But then the lantern light shifts. A flashlight beam sweeps the channel. It finds them. For one heartbeat, Bobby sees the face of a guard. Eyes narrowing, recognizing movement. The guard shouts. Boots stomp on wood. A rifle raises. Leonard whispers, "Hold on." He shoves the pole down hard, pushing the skiff sideways into reeds. The reeds resist. Thick like a wall. The skiff scrapes. The guard fires. The shot cracks the air, deafening. Wood splinters from the skiff's edge. Bobby screams silently, body curling. Leonard pushes again, teeth gritted, forcing the skiff through reeds like forcing a body through a narrow door. They break through into a wider pocket of water. Open, exposed. Leonard pushes forward desperately. Behind them, shouting grows. A second skiff appears. Pursuit. Bobby's breath comes fast now, panic overriding discipline. Leonard's voice snaps, harsh. "Quiet!" he hisses. Bobby clamps down again, shaking. The chase becomes a nightmare glide. Silent skiffs slipping through black water. Reeds flicking faces. Moon hidden behind cloud. Leonard steers toward what he thinks is a wider slough that might connect to a main channel. But the swamp doesn't care what he thinks. It offers him a fork, 2 black mouths of water. Leonard hesitates. Bobby whispers, "Left." Leonard whispers back, "Why?" Bobby's voice shakes. "I don't know. I just—" Leonard chooses left. They push. The pursuit skiff follows. Closer now. Bobby hears the soft scrape of pole on mud behind them. A whisper of breath. The hunter becoming hunted. Leonard's shoulders burn. His pole hits something solid. The skiff jolts. Leonard swears under his breath. He pushes again. It won't move. They've grounded on a mud shelf. Bobby's eyes go wide. Leonard leans forward, trying to shove them free. The pursuit skiff closes. A flashlight beam hits Bobby's face. Bobby raises an arm, blinded. A voice shouts, "Got him!" Leonard makes a decision. He grabs Bobby by the collar and hisses, "Water!" Bobby shakes his head, panicked. "I can't." Leonard shoves him, not cruelly, desperately. Bobby splashes into black water. Cold shock steals breath. He flails, trying not to scream. Leonard steps in after him, and for a moment Bobby thinks Leonard is saving him. Then Leonard whispers in his ear, fierce and urgent. "Go under," he says. "Hold the reeds." Bobby's eyes bulge. Leonard shoves Bobby's head down, not to drown him, but to force him beneath the surface long enough to hide. Bobby's lungs burn instantly. He grabs reeds underwater, slimy, thick, and clings. Above, Bobby hears muffled voices. The pursuit skiff bumps against their grounded skiff. Leonard splashes, drawing attention. He makes noise on purpose. He is sacrificing himself. Bobby's mind screams no, but his body is trapped underwater, clinging, burning. Above, a struggle. Boots slipping, someone cursing, a hard impact. Then a splash farther away, as if Leonard has jumped or been shoved. Bobby stays under until his lungs feel like they will tear. Then he lifts his face just enough to sip air through reeds, barely breaking surface. He sees shapes above, men in the pursuit skiff, flashlights sweeping, searching. One says, "Where's the other?" Another replies, "He went under." They prod the reeds with poles. Bobby freezes, face pressed to slime, trying to become part of the swamp. A pole slides close to his shoulder, touches his jacket. Bobby's heart stops. Then the pole moves on. A guard spits into the water. "He'll come up," he says. The men wait. Bobby holds his breath again, forcing himself still. Seconds stretch. His chest aches, his fingers numb. The men get impatient. They can't wait forever. The thin man's philosophy again. Time, control. Finally, one guard says, "Leave it. Swamp'll finish him." They push off. The pursuit skiff glides away, flashlight beams fading. Bobby stays hidden for a long time after the last light disappears. When he finally surfaces fully, trembling, he looks around. Leonard is gone. The skiff is gone. The night is empty. Bobby is alone in black water, clinging to reeds like a drowning man clings to faith. He whispers, "Thank you." Not sure who he's thanking. Then he tries to move. He tries to swim quietly, using reeds and mud shelves to guide him. He doesn't know where he's going. He just knows a way. But the swamp is wide, and weather is coming. Rain begins as a soft hiss on leaves, then harder. Droplets hammer water, breaking the surface into a million ripples. Visibility drops. Sound becomes muffled under rain. Bobby's teeth chatter. He finds a mud bank and hauls himself out, exhausted. He collapses under a cypress, breathing hard, shaking, hugging his knees like a child. He listens. No engines, no voices. Just rain and frogs and the distant, distant hum of something that might be a road, or might be his imagination. Bobby closes his eyes for 1 second. 1 second becomes longer. Sleep in the swamp is not rest. It is vulnerability. When he wakes, how long later he doesn't know, the rain has eased to a drizzle. Fog rises. Everything is gray. Bobby sits up fast, heart racing. He tries to stand. His legs wobble. He realizes he is covered in leeches. small, dark shapes clinging. He makes a strangled sound and rips them off, fingers shaking, leaving tiny, bleeding dots. He stumbles forward, pushing through palmetto, following what he thinks is higher ground. He sees a clearing. He thinks it might be a road. He stumbles toward it, and then he stops. Because in the clearing, there's a line of boots, not boots on feet, boots arranged, a neat line, toe to heel, like trophies, like a message. Not all of them, just enough to make the point. Bobby can't count. His mind refuses. His stomach heaves. He gags, falling to his knees. He hears a sound behind him, a slow step. Bobby turns his head. The thin man stands there, rain-darkened, hat brim low, rifle loose in his hands. Bobby's breath catches. He tries to scramble. He can't. His legs are mud and terror. The thin man looks at him with mild disappointment. "You almost made it," he says. Bobby's voice breaks. "Please," he whispers. The thin man tilts his head. "You hunters always think there's a please that changes things," he says. Bobby sobs, words tumbling. "I didn't do nothing, I just—" The thin man cuts him off softly. "You came," he says. "That's enough." Bobby's eyes dart to the clearing, to the boots lined like a ritual. He whispers, "Why?" The thin man's smile is thin. "Because you don't respect what you don't understand," he says. "You come in loud, shootin', laughin', takin'. This place ain't yours." Bobby shakes his head frantically. "We was leaving," he says. "We was leaving." The thin man nods. "After you saw too much," he says. Bobby's body shakes so hard it's almost vibrating. He realizes, too late, that Leonard's sacrifice only bought time, not freedom. The swamp doesn't let you win by inches. It lets you lose by miles. The thin man steps closer. Bobby backs up on elbows, mud soaking his shirt. He tries to scream. His throat produces only a weak sound. The thin man kneels, close enough that Bobby can smell damp tobacco again. He says, almost kindly, "Swamp's hungry," he whispers. "Swamp don't like leftovers." Bobby cries, "No!" The thin man stands. He turns away, as if bored again, and gestures to someone Bobby can't see. A second figure steps out from the palmetto, silent, efficient. Bobby's last view is the boots lined in the clearing, a strange, tidy monument to violence. Then the world tips. Then the swamp closes, and the last hunter who might have escaped becomes another absence. 14 went in. None came out. The search begins. Back at the fish camp, Harold has been pacing for hours. He's a man built from stubbornness and coffee, but even stubborn men crack under the weight of a missing group. When the radio call came, "This is Earl Maddox." Harold felt relief so sharp it almost made him cry. Then he felt confusion, because Earl's voice was wrong. Flat. Short. Not Earl's rhythm. Harold called back, trying to confirm. The voice snapped at him. "Don't bring nobody." And that snapped something inside Harold. Because Earl Maddox wouldn't say that. Earl Maddox would say, "Bring help. Bring boats. Bring light. Bring bodies." So Harold ignored the instruction. He called the sheriff anyway. By nightfall, 2 deputies and a sheriff's cruiser arrive at the fish camp. The sheriff, Wade Collier, is a man who looks like he's been built out of heat and bad news. He listens to Harold's story without interrupting, chewing the inside of his cheek like he's trying to keep his own fear from showing. 14, Wade repeats. 14 men. Harold nods, hands trembling. And dogs, he adds. Wade stares at the swamp beyond the ramp. He's been out there before. He knows the swamp eats people sometimes. But 14, that isn't an accident. That's a disaster. Wade starts forming a plan. Boats at first light, search grid, radio checks, calling in volunteer airboats from nearby counties. He also calls the state. Because 14 missing men isn't a local problem anymore. It's a headline. And headlines bring pressure. Pressure brings scrutiny. Scrutiny brings men who ask questions that swamp people hate. By dawn, the fish camp is crowded. Families arrive. Wives, brothers, fathers, sons, faces tight, eyes bright with fear. They bring photos. They bring names. They bring hope like a fragile object. Harold watches Marla Maddox, Earl's sister, stand at the edge of the ramp, staring at Blackwater like she's trying to will it to give him back. The sheriff steps forward, voice loud enough for the crowd. "We'll bring 'em home," he says. It's the thing you're supposed to say. But in his chest, Sheriff Wade feels doubt, heavy and sour. Because the swamp doesn't always return what it takes. And because something about Harold's story, about that wrong voice on the radio, feels like a human hand on the scale. They launch. Airboats roar, tearing the swamp's silence apart. Deputies with binoculars scan the water. Volunteer hunters and fishermen join, moving through channels, calling names. Earl, Bobby, Cliff, Red. Names bounce off trees and return as echoes. Thin and useless. They find the first clue near midday. A hat. Red's hat. Harold recognizes it instantly because he'd seen Red wear it to the fish camp. It floats near reeds, turning slowly. A deputy reaches with a pole and lifts it out like evidence. The sheriff's jaw tightens. "We keep looking," he says. They find boot prints on a muddy bank. Many prints, confused, overlapping, a sign of struggle or haste. But then the mud fills quickly, water rising, erasing edges. The swamp is actively destroying the trail. They find the fallen cypress blocking a channel, fresh, scraped, dragged. Wade stares at the scrape marks and feels a cold certainty. "That ain't Storm," he mutters. A deputy looks at him. "You think someone did that?" Wade doesn't answer right away. Then he says, "Low, somebody's out here." They push deeper. They find the abandoned first camp island, tarps left, cooler tipped, ash from the fire. Not a calm camp. A camp abandoned fast. They find the torn second camp, lantern smashed, flannel strip tied to a branch like a marker. A deputy touches the cloth and says, "This looks staged." Wade nods slowly. Staged is the right word, because the more they find, the more it feels like someone wanted the searchers to see certain things, to follow certain trails, to go in circles, and as they go deeper, the swamp begins to work on the search party too. Engines stall, propellers hit submerged roots, fog rolls in, rain returns in bursts, men get disoriented, men argue, men get scared. By the second day, the search has to pause at night, because the swamp at night is suicide for people who don't know every bend. Families beg to keep going. Wade refuses. He's not donating more bodies, but refusing doesn't feel like leadership. It feels like admitting you're helpless. On the third day, they find the platform, the hidden dock. A deputy spots it from the water, wood posts, barrels, tarps. They approach cautiously. Wade's heart pounds. This is it. This is the human hand. They climb onto the platform. It's empty, cleaned. No guns, no radios, no evidence that stays. Just damp boards, a few scuff marks, and the faint smell of fuel. Wade curses under his breath. A deputy finds something tucked under a plank. An envelope. Not money, not letters. A matchbook from the fish camp. Damp but legible. Like a taunt. Like someone saying, "We can come and go as we please." Wade feels rage flare. He orders his men to search the surrounding area, but the swamp opens into too many directions. It's like trying to find one spider in a forest. They search for a week, then 2. They bring in dogs. But the dogs get confused by water and overlapping trails. They bring in a helicopter for aerial scans, but canopy hides everything. They drag channels with hooks and lines, pulling up logs, tires, old junk, never what they want. Never the missing men. Not one body, not one rifle, not even a radio, just absence. The sheriff faces cameras now. Reporters show up with microphones and sharp questions. Do you believe foul play is involved? Is there an active suspect? Are you warning the public about a killer in the swamp? Wade chooses his words carefully, because warning the public means admitting he can't control the swamp, and admitting he can't control the swamp means panic. But not warning the public means more people might go out there, and the thought of more people disappearing makes his skin crawl. He says, "We're investigating all possibilities," which is what men say when they have nothing solid. Meanwhile, families unravel. A wife sits on her porch, staring at nothing, coffee going cold, waiting for a knock that doesn't come. A father walks the ramp every morning, eyes scanning black water as if his son might rise like a miracle. A teenage boy stops going to school, convinced his dad will come home if he just stays ready. The town becomes a place haunted by absence. 14 empty chairs. 14 missing laughs. 14 lives cut loose from the world without explanation. And deep in the backwaters, the men who did it, if they are men, remain invisible. Because the swamp doesn't just hide bodies, it hides operations, it hides cruelty, it hides the kind of people who prefer places where sound dies quickly, the rumors that replace the dead. When you can't bury bodies, you bury uncertainty with stories. Rumors spread. Some people say the hunters stumbled into a meth operation. In 1978, it isn't the modern epidemic yet, but illegal labs exist. Small, crude, dangerous. Others say it was Moonshiners, running backwater liquor the way it's been run for generations. Violent men protecting tradition with guns. Others say smugglers. Stolen goods moved through waterways where roads can't follow. And then there are the swamp stories. People say the voices were spirits. People say the hunters were cursed. People say the swamp has a hunger that grows if you feed it. Those stories spread because they're easier than the truth. Because the truth might be that human beings, hidden by geography, did something so cold it feels supernatural. The sheriff keeps investigating. He finds nothing that sticks. A few locals get questioned. A few drifters get blamed. Nothing holds. The operation, whatever it was, is gone. Moved deeper. Moved elsewhere. Evaporated like mist. Wade loses sleep. Harold loses business. The fish camp becomes infamous. People stop launching there. They point at the water and say, "That's where they disappeared." Like the swamp is a mouth. Like the ramp is a tongue. And the backwaters return to what they were before. Quiet, wide, indifferent. But the families never return to what they were. Because absence doesn't age like grief. Grief at least has a body of fact. Absence just sits, it waits. It stares back at you every time a phone rings. Years later, a teenager from that time, grown now, returns to the fish camp ramp and stands in the same spot his mother stood. He looks at the water and whispers his father's name into it. Nothing answers. Just frogs. Just wind. Just the swamp resuming its endless, indifferent song. What the swamp teaches if you listen. Here's the uncomfortable truth about places like the Florida backwaters. They don't forgive arrogance, and they don't protect innocence either. The hunters in 1978 weren't saints. They were men with guns who went out to take, but they also weren't killers. They didn't deserve to be erased. They deserved, at minimum, the dignity of being found. And that's what makes this story so heavy. Not just that 14 men vanished, but that the swamp, combined with human intent, made it possible for them to vanish without leaving enough behind. a trap built from geography, a crime scene that dissolves itself, a wilderness that doubles as a weapon. The stranger at the fish camp said, "Don't follow voices you don't recognize." That line becomes the story's echo because it applies to more than sound. Don't follow warnings you dismiss as folklore. Don't follow confidence into places you can't control. Don't follow the idea that we're experienced means we're safe. Because experience doesn't matter when someone else is writing the rules. And in 1978, someone else wrote rules in the Backwaters. Rules that ended with 14 hunters becoming 14 absences. If you had been there, if you heard that distant, uneven shotgun blast at dawn, if you saw Red's hat floating, if you felt the swamp go quiet in that unnatural way, would you have turned back sooner? Or would you have done what most people do in danger? Would you have tried to fix it, tried to be brave, tried to help, and walked deeper into the trap? Hold that question, because the way you answer it says a lot about how you think safety works. And in the swamp, safety is never guaranteed. It's negotiated moment to moment. And sometimes, it's stolen.